Whoa, wait a minute here. I want to fix something. Hold on just a second. Oh, there we go. Need to strap that down. All right. Now we're rocking. So we're going to have a couple of guests tonight. One of them's having some technical difficulties trying to get on. I hope he can figure that out. And the other one, I'm going to bring in probably about half past the hour. Once again, welcome everybody to PBR Monday, number 11 of 2021. And we're going to talk today about days 9 and 10. We're going to wrap it all up today. And then starting in the next few weeks before tour season launches, I'm going to be talking about some things very specific to the tour. So I'm going to spend an entire, there he is, JJ is on. I'll bring you in a few minutes, buddy. So I'm going to talk about some things that are very specific to the tour. So I'm going to spend an entire episode here in one of the upcoming weeks on navigation. Talk about TrailTech Voyager Pro, best practices, how to use it, how to make sure it's got the latest software in it. Talk about how to use it in conjunction with other GPS units. Very specific to the tour, why we use it, and exactly how you should use it for the tour. We're going to talk a lot about your PLB and how we're going to configure those and set them up this year so everybody does it the same way. A little bit of a heads up. One thing I'm going to ask you to do is we told everybody that, the default of once every 10 minutes is just fine. And some people said, well, we have a plan that allows it to ping every minute or 2 minutes or something like that. That's fine too. And what I told you is that if you want to do that, I would accept that in an emergency in lieu of a track for, minor portions of the tour. I still want the track that you create. But if something happened and, you lost it or something and you had that PLB pinging every minute or so, we could probably work that out somehow. But the one thing I don't want anybody doing is I don't want anything less than 10-minute resolution when you're out on day 2 in the desert. Because what that invites are people trying to game the system, looking to see where everybody's at. And I don't want that. So on day 2, out in the desert, when you're in the mystery section, no more than 10-minute resolution. And it's easy to switch the things back and forth. That won't be a problem. We'll talk about how to do that. So we'll talk a lot about navigation. We'll talk about your PLB. We're going to have an entire episode devoted to what happens when something goes wrong. We're going to talk about mechanicals, medical emergencies, what happens when your partner gets ticked off at you, all that stuff. But we'll talk about how important it is to have thought through all of those things in advance. That's one of the things that just makes life easier as you get older. When I talk to my wife and some of my younger friends, and they want to know, when I was teaching, before I retired from teaching, that's probably a better example. Students would frequently ask me, how is it that you seem to know the answer to every question? Well, it's not off the cuff. It's because I had been asked that question over a 25-year career dozens, if not hundreds of times. And so after a while, you know how to respond to it. It's not a surprise anymore. The best way to deal with something like the tour, which is going to throw something unexpected at you, is to have thought through all of that stuff in advance. Think through all of the things that you think could happen to you. What are you going to do if your partner decides to give it up in the middle of the day somewhere? You should have thought that out. It's not an unreasonable circumstance to occur. What are you going to do if you get a flat tire? What are you going to do if you blow a motor or something? Think about all those. Think through that stuff in advance. You got plenty of time, and that way when it happens, you will have at least some sort of a nascent plan developed in your own head. So make sure you game all that stuff out. Think through those scenarios. We'll talk about that. We'll devote an entire episode to that. You can ask questions, and I can tell you all the things that have happened to me, and it's been damn near everything. I've done the tour 6 times by tour rules, and in those 6 times, there is nothing that is likely to happen to you that probably didn't happen to me. One other thing that I'm going to talk about a lot in the coming weeks is something that I have been doing for years, which is I have really changed the equipment that I use when I go trail riding. I have never been very happy with motocross equipment for riding trails. I've always thought it was too heavy, it's too bulky, it's too hot. And a couple of times on the tour of Idaho, I didn't ride motocross pants. There was a gentleman way back in the beginning, one of the first, might have been the first 10 that did the tour. showed up in a set of like logging boots. And I remember thinking, that's not a bad idea at all. They give you plenty of protection. They're a hell of a lot more comfortable to walk around in than motocross boots. Now, I've never gone that far, but I've always worn motocross boots. I've always worn either SG12s or the CD Crossfire series, which I found to be acceptably comfortable for trail riding, but no more. Now that I have these Climb GTX boots, the concept of me going back and riding trails in a motocross boot, that ship sailed. I'm not doing it anymore. There are boots that are very comfortable that you can walk around in all day. They ventilate well. They're waterproof. Your feet don't get hot in them, and they're not uncomfortable. Why not be wearing those? For trail riding, they're going to give you all the protection that you're going to need. Similarly, I've rethought everything in my personal clothing, more than just boots, the gloves that I wear. And even like pants and jerseys and stuff. Climb makes some really interesting pants. What is it? The Switchback is a really interesting one. What's the other one? Anyway, I've got some of all of them, and I've been riding around in them, but Climb and others make some non-motocross motorcycle pants that are very interesting. Now, some of them are made out of canvas. The one that I wore the other day when I was out in the desert working on day 2 stuff is Climb's sort of canvas pant. It's sort of a knockoff of a set of Carhartts or Dickies, except it's got D3O armor in it. Now, I wouldn't wear that on the tour, even though they're incredibly comfortable. These are really, really nice pants. And I'll do an episode and all that stuff, and I'll show you links and everything, do a little mini review of them. They're insanely comfortable, but I think that there's too much of a chance that you're going to get them wet at some time during the tour, and they're just like cotton ducks, so you wouldn't want that. You'd have to have a pretty good stout set of rain pants, I think, to go along with it, because even in just a minor downpour, you would get those soaking wet, and it'd be hard to dry them out. But they also make some pants, which I have on the way, that are made of better materials, but they're still casual style pants. They vent well. They've got some zippers and stuff in them, but they're made for people that want to be able to wear their pants to where they're going to go riding and then not have to spend 15 minutes, changing out of street clothes into motorcycle-specific clothes. It's a little bit more of a casual type of a setup. I've been trying a lot of that stuff lately, and I really like it a lot. I still wear Climb jerseys in the right colors just because I think there's not a lot of casual clothing that's going to substitute for a jersey. And Climb makes some really good lightweight jerseys. They make some good lightweight armor to wear underneath the jerseys now in really good colors. And that stuff's cool. And, some of their jerseys even have padding in the sleeves and things like that for when you want to go ultralight. All good stuff. They've thought through this stuff a lot. There's some other companies have as well. But I'm telling you, if I ever do another tour of Idaho, there won't be a stitch of motocross clothing on me. I'm not those big plastic roost guards. I think those are terrible for tour of Idaho kind of riding. I threw one away once. I rode a couple of days and I ditched it. I said, I am not wearing this thing anymore. I don't think you need neck braces or any of that stuff. I started out wearing all that stuff, and over the years, I just got rid of all of it. And I don't even wear it in casual trail riding anymore just because you're not going fast enough. Most trail riding, you're going 10, 15, 20 miles an hour. And most of the get-offs are low speeds, and so you can really lighten your load a lot and make yourself a lot cooler if you think about some of that stuff. Now, I know that some of you, you're not going to buy that. You're going, nope, I want all the protection I can get, and that's fine. If you can't be dissuaded, go ahead and get all that stuff. But I guarantee you, stuff like neck braces and a lot of really heavy, clunky armor, that stuff makes you hot. And remember, the Tour of Idaho is about surviving from one day to the next. So I want to get through this today. I want to talk about day 9 and day 10. And day 10 is going to go pretty quick because there's not too much to talk about on day 10. But I want to bring in somebody here to talk about day 9. And here he is, our old buddy Jeff Jensen. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing well. How are you, Martin? Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you just fine, man. It's great. Your audio's great. Lighting looks really good. I want to bring you up first to talk about this. And Jeff and I are good friends. He's been on here before, once or twice, right? Maybe 2 times?
Yeah, a couple times, I think.
Yeah, a couple times. And Jeff and I are a lot alike. We're similar in age. Kind of our backgrounds and everything are similar. We sort of think alike in some things, but not in others. He disagrees with me with a lot of stuff, which is okay. But one thing about Jeff that I really like is that this guy plans like you wouldn't believe. His attention to detail is really good, but he also knows what happens when the wheels come off because he's had a couple of pretty interesting day nine experiences, and that's what I brought him on here to talk about tonight. He's the expert at how things can go sideways on day nine. Is that not correct?
Day 9 has been my nemesis.
So, I'm just going to turn it over to you. Why don't you talk about the day nine on your first successful tour a couple years ago? Tell us what happened.
Okay. Well, day 9 is a long day. It's not as long as some of them as mileage goes, but it's difficult and it has some variety of terrain. So, day 9 in 19, I believe it was, I got an early start like I usually do out of Locksaw. And I had some problems with weather the previous 4 or 5 days. I got caught in a thunder and lightning storm up at one of the lookouts and on day 8. And so I didn't get my route down that I wanted to do going out to Windyville and going up to Scurvy and that. So I needed to grab that on day 9, I believe. And so anyway, started off, got that, left at 5, got out of Locksaw and everything. Weather was good, and got to Scurvy, and then continued on. And after you leave Scurvy, you're headed north, and you get up on the State Line Trail, and it can be bad and it can be good. And that particular year, they had crews had just been in there, and they had brushed it back, and everything was in good shape. And I was rolling along at a pretty good clip, and on day 9, it's the last difficult day. Day 10 is pretty simple. And I probably got a little bit overconfident and thought, I might actually have this thing licked this year. And so I'm rolling along and got lost a couple times up around Lundy Ridge in that area. I got lost up in there, but found the trail again and continued on and got up by the State Line Trail. And there's a challenge point section there where you've got to go down and get your picture taken above Heart Lake. And this trail that they had just brushed out intersected another trail that I missed. I just didn't see it. I was rolling along, looking forward up to where the viewpoint is for over Heart Lake, and missed the trail that bangs off to the left and continues on. And so I got out to the viewpoint, and I'm taking my selfie out there and everything. And there's a trail that takes off and rolls over the edge right there where you're looking down at the lake. And there was a motorcycle track in it. I'm like, wow, this is cool. I found the trail and just keep going, and not realizing that particular trail was the old trail and it was closed. And as I rolled off down there, got down in there, and it started getting not as well brushed out as the previous trail. I thought, wow, this is kind of unusual. The trail crew just stopped brushing here all of a sudden. And then you can see the old trail. It winds around this avalanche path, and it's very visible for half a mile out in front of you. You can see it winding around the hill, and you see the lake down there. And so I get down in there, and I drop over some rollovers I'm like, wow, this is pretty substantial. Hope I don't have to come back out of here type deal. And I get down there and I lose the trail, and I'd lost the trail before. So you just stop and park and start doing circles and walk around looking for the trail. And I couldn't really find it. And about the time that I stopped and parked and peeled my helmet off to walk around, and it was about 1:15, 1:20 in the afternoon, a beautiful day. And I hear a pack of wolves howling right there in this basin that I'm in. And I'm just kind of giggling to myself, thinking, man, some people that hadn't been in the woods like I have, they'd probably get a little bit more rattled than I was. As it was, I was just kind of laughing about it and going, we really are out here. And anyway, I couldn't find the trail, but I pulled out my phone and I had cell coverage. So I called Martin up, and I'm like, hey, man, I dropped down in here and I can't find the trail. Does it go down by the lake or what? And he says, just a second. He pulls up my PLB link and he goes, well, you're on the old trail. You got to get up out of there. And I'm like, well, that's easier said than done. He says, well, I'm looking here and I see where, you're about 800 yards down below the old trail and this, that. And so I said, okay, stand by and I'll get back to you. So I get my bike started up, and these hillsides that I'm on are covered with bear grass, which is, it's pretty slippery stuff. It's hard to get traction in that stuff. And so anyway, I find my way back up to the trail, and I'm starting to climb my way up out of there. And Martin's also given me a lot of encouragement. I told him I didn't think I could get out of there, and he's going, "Oh, you got your rope. Just rope yourself up out of there." And I'm like, "Well, it's an avalanche path. There's really nothing to connect to." And he says, "Oh, you'll figure it out." And so I get up there and I get to a spot I can't go any further. So I get the kit out, and the Cascade Rescue Kit, and I hook it up. And I was a little short on rope, but I had a toe strap, so I was able to use my toe strap to reach a tree that I could connect to. And you can only, when you're by yourself and the bike's laying on its side, you can only pull about a foot at a time, and then you got to go pick the pegs and the handlebars and everything up, and then go put some more tension on it, and it'll roll. And you can get up there. And I drug it up, I don't know, 15, 20 feet, and got up over this obstacle that I had. And then I went about another 75 yards to another spot that I couldn't go. And so I started roping that one up, and I got about halfway into that, and I'm like, I'm getting pretty beat, and I'm out of water. So I grabbed my saw, and I says, well, I'm going to continue on up the path and go clear the path. So when I do get going, I'm not banging into saplings and running over rocks and everything. So when I do get my momentum going, I can get clear. So it's about a half a mile, maybe 3/4 of a mile, that I clear this trail, hiking up to where I dropped over from my challenge point section, and sawed a lot of trees out, cut the grass back on a lot of spots so I didn't have the slippery grass on the trail. And I'd also lowered the air pressure in my rear tire, so I had the best traction I could get. And so then I came back down and cleared some more stuff on the way back down and continued. And I got the bike up over that obstacle. And when I climbed up, there was one section that it was a pretty substantial rollover. And even on a good day, I don't think I could have ridden up that. So I had figured out kind of how I could side hill around and then zigzag my way back up, pulling the bike up where I needed to. And long story, I roped the bike up in 4 separate places. And then the last, 20 yards or so, climbing back up there, I was able to get a pretty good run at it, but I wasn't able to clear it. And so you just kind of ghost the bike up as far as you can, and then lay it on its side, and then get up there and jump on it and ghost it another 2 or 3 feet, and then just keep doing that. And I finally got the bike up there, and it was about, I don't know, Martin, what time was it? 8:45 or something when I called you and said
it was pretty late.
Yeah, said that I got the bike out, and Martin had already told me that he had a friend coming out, Dan Hoheim, to take care of me. And he said he had a group of turtles that were going to come and help out the next day if I didn't make it out of there. And I think he was just about as excited as I was when I called him and told him that I got the bike out of there. And
I didn't want to drive 600 miles.
Yeah. And so anyway, I got the bike out of there, and then I had to hike back down because I peeled my saddlebags and peeled as much of the gear off the bike as I could. So I had to hike back down there about 3/4 of a mile and grab my gear and then slep it back up and get the bike put back together. And by now it's sun setting, and I still had 70 miles to go to get to Wallace, but made it.
And I have encouraged everybody since that happened to look at that spot, look down into Heart Lake, because you can see the trail going down there. It's an old foot trail. I don't think that trail's ever been moto legal. It's an old foot trail, and when I look down at that and look where you went, I just go, ay, man, getting your bike out of there, that's pretty studly procedure. We had talked about some alternatives too. The one thing you can do if you ever find yourself in a situation like that is there's some pretty steep topography there, even up on the ridge. The ridge isn't level. It's got some dips in it. And one thing that we discussed, I think you tried for a while, was just to side hill around until the contour you were on intersected the ridge again. But I guess there were too many trees to cut out to do that. I think that's what went wrong with that. Is that correct?
It was pretty steep, and the bear grass was just gnarly. The back tire's just spinning on it, and you're losing the back end down the hill. And it was, it was day 9, so the tire was pretty much used up by then. It had 900 miles on it, and the bike was getting tired too. And anyway, I made it out of there, and I was pretty whooped when I got up there. I was out of water, and still had a long ways to go. And but then the rest of the trail was pretty cool. I got lost a couple times up there, because it was pretty dark by the time I got up to some of the junctions. But it worked out.
Yeah, you're
really good to see Donna.
Yeah, you got to get in line to have seen some of those intersections in the dark. That's pretty common. It's whether or not it's before or after midnight that distinguishes how fast you are. So let's fast forward a year. Last year, you decided to give her another go, 2 years in a row, and day 9 bit you again, but in a different way. What happened last year?
Well, last year, day 9, the weather had been perfect for me up till that point. It had been hot down in the desert on day 2, but not. It wasn't incapacitating, and got through that and got up to day 9, and I was having a great tour. I was one of my challenges. One of the things that I personally wanted to challenge myself was to try and ride up a couple levels where I could and see some different terrain than just the solo route. And so I had built up a lot of extra points and rode some bonus points. And so that was kind of how I was rolling it. And being more experienced, a lot of the junctions I knew where to turn and where not to turn. But seeing some of the 2 and 3 man versions was fun. But day 9, I left Elk City, which was basically which would have been day 7, with full load of fuel. And the weather there was warm, and I wasn't paying attention to the weather forecast. And Elk City was really the last place I could have bought rain gear there, because I left there full fuel bags and rode on out, got down close to Lowell, and I ran into some side-by-side guys, and they were loading up and they were done. And so I was able to bum some gas from them. So it is available. You are able to bum gas if you see people. They were very generous and gave me a couple gallons of gas. And then I went into Lowell, to the Wilderness Inn there, and the weather was still pretty good. But I got wind that the weather was going to be deteriorating. So I'm looking around trying to find rain gear, and there was no rain gear to be had in Lowell. So left Lowell, rode my day 8, had a great ride there. Aaron told about day 8 going up to Scurvy, and I was lucky. They had Forest Service had just came through and brushed out that trail going up to Scurvy. And so it was a hoot for me. I was in 3rd gear, just having one going up that hill, not fighting the brush at all. But then going into Locksaw that night, you could tell that the weather was going to start changing a little bit. And I was trying to get some rain gear at Locksaw. They didn't have any at their store. And so got up the next morning, left at 5, and it was dry when I left. And I was like, all right, could see a few stars, but not that many. And got about half an hour out from Locksaw when the rain started. So I put my Gore-Tex on and continued on up to the Rock Garden Trail. And it had been raining, and so I got to and then by the time I got to the trailhead, it quit. So I peeled my Gore-Tex off, and the Rock Garden Trail, when it's tacky like that, it's a hoot. And I was riding above my abilities, cleaning the switchbacks and just having a great time. And the rain had stopped, and I was like, wow, this might work out okay. And then you continue on, you go to Lundy Ridge, and then you drop down to Cayuse Airport and that whole section. As soon as I rolled out of the trees, the rain started, and it just was really getting busy. So I put my Gore-Tex back on, and from the Cayuse Airport to the Cedars and that's pretty much quad trails, old logging roads, and it's high speed. but it was pouring down rain and just really getting busy. And then as we start climbing up and up and up, I started getting into snow, and it really wasn't sticking on the ground too badly yet, but it was sticking on me. And I started getting wetter and continued on, went through the cedars, and I was kind of looking around to see if I could find anybody camped there that maybe I could find a place to hunker down for a couple hours and ride it out. And there was nobody there. It was abandoned.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. And I was like, man, if I could bum or buy some rain gear from somebody and keep going, this will get going. But then I got up high, and every time I got up high, it started snowing, and then you'd roll back down into the valleys, and it would be raining again. And by about 10:30, I got to one of the challenge points there where you kind of look off to the west, and it was just gray and pouring down rain, and there was like no breaks in the storm coming in. And I was standing there shivering pretty good at that point. I was wet to the skin. And so I pulled my dry gloves out and then continued on from that challenge point, headed up towards the state line trail again. And the year before on that section, you know, I'd been rolling along on that trail at 30 miles an hour easily, just having a great time. Well, now when it's snow covered, I'm rolling along at 10 miles an hour and dabbing all the time. And I'm starting to think, well, maybe I'm going to have to bail out of this thing. And so I stopped and checked the maps, and I'm looking at the maps and looking how to get out. It's not looking very good. And so I ride on for about another 4 miles, and I see a guy camped there, and he's got like this old 80s vintage date rape van going there, and a little backpacker stove and backpacker's tent, I should say. So I pull into his camp and shut my bike off and holler out, hello. And here comes this guy. He sticks his head out of his tent, and I ask him, you know, what's my best options for finding a town, a village, or any place, any kind of a store or anything. And he tells me basically the next one is at this intersection up there about, I don't know, it was a few miles up the road. So I thanked him and continued on, and into the snow and into the rain and into the snow. And then I get to the junction, and I'm like, okay, I can turn right here and go back down to Superior, Montana, or I can turn left here and continue on. And I figured out that it was going to be 30, 40 miles before I got to another really good bailout point. And I remembered that that state line trail runs up the ridges, and it's pretty exposed up there. And I was sitting there, and I'm kind of thinking back and forth, and do you bail or do you go, or do you bail or you go? And what really prompted me to bail was my hands were just so cold that I was like, you know, if something happens, I'm not going to be able to get a fire going here. And plus all the firewood and everything was just soaked from the rain and the snow. And I thought, you know, I better pull out of this thing. You know, it's solo route, and, you know, if I had somebody with me, I maybe could have continued on, but being solo, it was like, nah, you got to pull the pin. This thing's, it's time. You don't need your name in the paper for something stupid like this. So I turned right and went 27 miles down to Superior, Montana. And as soon as I got cell coverage, I called and left Martin a message, and parked down by a truck stop down there. And they had a coffee shop across the street there where you could drive up coffee shop. And I was walking over to get a cup of coffee, and here Martin and the hillbillies show up right behind me. And I'm like, what the hell are you guys doing here? Well, got your message, and we were driving back. And so we stopped in to see if you needed anything. Poor Martin, he was dying from kidney stones. He was not very comfortable, man. And I was like, no, I got my wife. I got her detoured over here to pick me up, and I'm going to go over and get a cup of coffee, and I'm good. But my tour was over.
Yeah, well, you got one under your belt, and you had a good time up till then. So, again, two things that everybody tells me you don't need. I don't need that rescue kit. I and almost everybody I know have not only carried that rescue kit, but I've used it a bunch of times. Lundy Ridge switchback one year that had a rut in it about 4 feet deep with a big tree root sticking in the middle of it. And it's in that really weird exposed spot. And that's back when I had my CRF 450X, which is heavy. And I could not for the life of me muscle that bike over that tree root. It just wasn't happening. It was the same place Jimmy had a really hard time getting his bike up, so I didn't feel so bad. Got out that rescue kit, man. There's a tree pointed right at the top of that switchback. Hike up there, put the other end on your handlebars, gas it, pull it, and go. Thing goes right up. That rescue kit is worth the wait, and especially if you're solo, you are insane if you don't have it, in my opinion. And then the other thing, uh, Jeff's got pretty good Gore-Tex. I know who made his Gore-Tex. Did it work when you got soaked up there?
No, it didn't. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was wet to the skin.
So there you go. Well, Jeff, thank you for coming on tonight and talking about your day night adventures. I hate to usurp you, but there's only one person on day 9 that everybody needs to talk to more than Jeff, and that's our next guest here, Donna. Jeff, I'm going to leave you in for a few minutes.
I,
So
I got I got one thing. I'm sure
go ahead.
Donna will tell you the same thing. We went up and cleared some trail today, and we ran into the Kaylin's store to get a Coke. And she says the guys aren't making the reservations, and I'm sure Donna would recommend the same thing. Get your reservations in early.
Yeah, I'm shocked. I mean, if you are a
Absolutely.
T1 team and you have not made your reservations yet, you are out of your effing mind because you will be sleeping on the ground in about half the places you go, and the rest of us are going to laugh at your dumbass every time that happens. We've been telling you for a year you need to make reservations well in advance because you might get a place in Pocatello, you might get a place in Arco, but you ain't getting a place with Kaylin. Chalice can be problematic at times. North Fork can be problematic. You have to make reservations. And if you don't do it and you end up sleeping on the ground, I'm just going to laugh my ass silly over that. Donna, you're a hotelier. What do you say about that?
We call ourselves Hotel Yahoos. That's our fun. Yes, please. Sorry, I think we have a delay on the video. Please get your reservations made and call direct. Don't book on our website, but do look at our website because it's got great pictures, give you an idea of the town and our rooms. But please do get your reservation in soon if you haven't. Listen to the guys; they know what they're talking about, and we're just so
Now,
excited. We can't wait to meet all of our newbies
well, I tell you
and our
what,
repeats, like Jeff.
we got this delay that's messing us up, but I'm going to let Donna talk as long as she wants in a minute. But I just want to tell you that there's a reason why Donna is the only human being that is a challenge point on the entire tour. When you show up at her place, it's not uncommon to find a dish with your name on it, your team's name on it, waiting for you when you get there. The hospitality at the Ryan has always just been incredible. And since Donna took it over, it's gone up an order of magnitude. It's the ideal place to spend your last real night of the tour. But you got to make that reservation. Donna's busy. She goes out of her way for you guys. She waits up late and all this kind of stuff. The least you can do is make your reservation. Now, Donna, so we're not dealing with this delay. You got 5 minutes. Lay it out. Tell them all about the Ryan Hotel. Tell them about Wallace. Tell them about you.
Okay. Our hotel is located in historic downtown Wallace, and it's just such a beautiful setting. We have amazing restaurants. We've got a couple new ones. So, we have 14 rooms in our hotel. You park out front. It's super easy. You push the ring bell, and one of us will answer the door, greet you, welcome you, and be thrilled that you made it because, well, we are. We're cheering you on all along. Wallace just has so much to offer in its beauty and tranquility. And the guys just work on their bikes. They get everything going. So the food is exceptional. And the way that Martin has changed the route in the last few years, you arrive earlier so that you can enjoy the beauty of this last night. before you end your adventure.
And that's going to be even earlier this year because we eliminated that last little single track up around Stevens Peak, except for people that need an extra challenge point at that point. So last year you were seeing most people around 7 or 8. This year you ought to be seeing most people before 7.
Okay, great. Yeah,
All right,
some we
Donna.
would see around 4 or 5.
That happens occasionally, but most of those people aren't our people. Those are some people that are doing T2s. I don't think very many of our people showed up at 4 or 5 last year. A few of them might have, but it's day 9 is still kind of a long day, and gosh, I don't know how many miles it is, but it's got to be close to 200 miles. Yeah, even coming from Lasha, it's not as bad as it used to be. They used to come from Lowell all the way to Wallace in a single day. And that was when people were getting in at 4 in the morning. I think one time I showed up at 4 in the morning there. But we wanted to stop that, so we're trying to get people into Wallace, which is really a very nice place to spend your last night of the tour. Donna's right. There's great restaurants all over the place. The place has got some history. And Donna, of course, is wonderful all by herself. So we get you in to see Kaylin as early as we can. We get you in to see Donna as early as we can for exactly the same reason. Donna, anything else?
Are we still doing the bonus points for the selfie this year?
That's right. And if it's
At
not
the Ryan?
Donna, it can be anybody else that works there, but you still are the only human challenge point.
Well, I think we should get even more creative this year. My daughter, Sheena, said, who cheers you on and helps me so much with marketing, she said we need to get creative this year. And so while you guys are on your adventure, think about it. It's like maybe we'll use the bikes with the selfies this year. A few more
We'll come
outdoor.
up with something.
So I'm gonna, be creative. I'm gonna be creative a little bit, and we'll have fun with it.
All right. Donna and Jeff, thanks very much. I got to get through the route description here tonight, the time we have left. I really appreciate both of you joining us tonight. Thanks again.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. See you
Bye-bye,
later.
y'all.
Mhm,
All right.
bye-bye.
Donna, I'll be in touch. I'll talk to you about the calendar and stuff. All right. There we go. So, let me make sure that I mute Jeffrey there. So there you go. Jeff's stories about day 9 are something you ought to listen to. Jeff is a great rider. This guy can ride me into the ground. He's way better than I am. And if he's telling you basically the same things that I am about, maybe you should think about this Gore-Tex thing a little bit. Maybe you should think about carrying this self-rescue kit. It sure worked for me. Maybe that's another data point. You ought to listen to some of that stuff. But let's get into day 9 right now. We've got roughly a half an hour or so left. So let's talk about day 9. And then day 10, I'm just going to go through really quickly because there's not that much to it. So day 9 starts at Laksha Lodge. And there's a long transfer section to get back to where the trails actually start. So you ride out of Laksha, and you're going to end up back at the Lundy Ridge Trail, the Lundy Ridge Rock Garden Trail. So you just reverse your route down Toboggan Ridge, which is a road that you took the night before, and a little bit of the Lolo Motorway. And you end back up at a place called Lundy Ridge Trail. Now, if you're a soloist and you rode all of the stuff at the end of day 8, you don't have to do that Rock Garden Lundy Ridge Trail. You have an option to just bypass that, ride on down to Cayuse Field, and you're in good shape. If you have to ride the Rock Garden Lundy Ridge Trail, what you can do is you can get that challenge point that you would have missed the day before. It's just an out and back to Scurvy Mountain, so you can get it on day 9 instead. That's written up in the description, and it's all good. So there's no problem with doing that. Several of you have PM'd me to ask that, and absolutely it's okay to pick up that challenge point on day 9 instead of day 8 if that's what you choose to do, ride the Lundy Ridge Rock Garden Trail. Now, as a person who's done it solo many times, if it were me, I've already told you I would do everything on day 8. So I'd go ahead and ride all that stuff out along. I'd ride Scurvy Ridge. I'd ride that, what's it called? Windy Bill Trail. I'd ride all that stuff, and I'd get into Loxia late if it were me, unless that was going to put an end to my tour. Because the Rock Garden Lundy Ridge Trail has a couple of really high effort spots for soloists. And it's better on that particular day, I think, to be able to bypass that, just ride up to Scurvy, poach that waypoint if you need to, then go on your way. But we're all different, so the options there, you can do whatever you need to do. Everybody's situation is a little different. As Jeff describes it, once you get out of that Cayuse landing field, across the creek there, you ride a series of old logging roads, and they take you down to the Black Canyon Road. So you will jump on Black Canyon Road, head north, and you end up at a place called the Cedars. And you actually ride a little bit of paved road just before you get to the Cedars. So the Cedars is a place that I talk about in the write-up as being a place you could almost always bum for some gas. I'm amazed that there wasn't anybody there when Jeffrey pulled in, but he was kind of late last year. And it was lousy weather, so maybe they just all left. But I have been to the Cedars a dozen times through the years, and never have I not seen a bunch of huge RVs, being the size of the one that's parked in my yard. 40-foot long, 50-foot long trailers with guys with big barbecue grills and stuff, a half a dozen ATVs and motorcycles parked around there easy up. For some reason, that place is popular with people that have big RVs. And I think it's the deepest place you can get into the woods there with a reasonably good road from Superior and St. Regis. So I've always been able to bum gas there. Usually people make you eat a cheeseburger or a hot dog or something along with the gas. Nobody's ever wanted my money. That is a good place to go looking for gas if you need some. After you leave there, you're going to climb up, and you end up at a place called Fly Hill. You ride way up steeply for about 5 or 6 miles. You end up at Fly Hill. Then you're going to start heading north again along what I consider to be one of the more unpleasant parts of the tour, across Gospel Hill and up towards the St. Joe. You're heading north into the St. Joe area. That road is about, 20, 25 miles long, and it's full of basketball-sized rocks, and I hate it. You're trying to keep the throttle open to make some speed going across there, and it absolutely will flatten your front tire if you're not careful. It'll also knock your teeth out. So once you get to the northern end of that, St. Joe River, you come down to the St. Joe River, you got a choice. And what we recommend is, I don't care at that point, if you want to go up and ride the entire trail, the entire state line trail, take a right there and do that purple variant. You might message me or something, but I'm probably going to tell you that's fine. The problem is State Line Trail over the past few years has been in a case of disrepair. That's the way we actually used to send people, because it's really spectacular up there. That the southern part of the State Line Trail is really wonderful and it's worth doing. But there's about a mile-long section that's pretty eaten up. It's uphill. There's some steep ruts in it, and then right at the top, there's a couple of slabs you got to ride over with some exposure off to the rider's left. And the people that live in that area all told me the same thing. We should take that off because it's late in the tour. You're riding heavily loaded bikes. Somebody's going to get hurt there. So instead, what we suggest that you do is you make the left turn there when you hit the St. Joe River. And I think there's a waypoint there, 9D XYZ 26. You're probably going to be a lot happier just sticking on our recommended route. But again, if you want to ride the State Line Trail for some reason, just PM me or send me a message or something through your beacon, and I'll probably tell you that's fine. But anyway, most of you are going to go and ride down into, what's the heck's the name of that creek? It's just below Red Ives Peak. There's a little creek down there you ride down into. Then you start riding steeply up towards Red Ives Peak. And at XYZ, 30, you turn north. And the trail, there's a nice logging road that goes out to a lookout, but it's really close. It's right after you turn on that logging road off the main road that goes over to Red Ives. That there is a trail there, and it's called the Heller Creek Simmons Trail, if I'm mistaken. It's in the write-up. And it's difficult to see in the beginning. It kind of goes through some buckgrass and stuff there. It wanders around a little bit. But if you don't see it, you'll see the trailhead sign there, but it's a little difficult to follow the trail because it wanders around for a little bit, or at least it did the last time I was there a few years ago. And then you quickly sort of crest a hill. Then you're on some side hilling, and by this time, that side hill won't bother you at all. Uh, you ride down into a little saddle. The challenge section takes off down in that saddle. I do not recommend this challenge section. You're out of your mind if you do this challenge section, unless you're desperate at this point. I don't recommend doing it. It's one of the more difficult ones. It's long. It's got some real exposure on it in a couple spots. You're better off just riding past this. Also, make sure that when you get down to XYZ 31, you sort of take your bearings a little bit because there's an intersection there. There's a trail that goes off to your left, steeply downhill. I mean, it immediately drops into a gully. You do not want that trail. If you take that trail and you start heading down towards that challenge section, it's a little difficult to ride back up. And what a lot of people do is they ride down, and there's actually another trail down there, a trail that goes up to Washout Point. The movie stars did that a few years ago. That trail's hardly ever sawed. It's a nightmare to ride up. You're going up it the long way. You don't want to end up getting stuck down there. So make sure at XYZ 31 you just continue along to the northeast, sort of. And you'll come up on State Line Trail a little bit north of Binocular Peak. Now, what happened to Jeff is he rode up there, and there is a trail. I mean, you're riding along, and you cross a trail, but it's not completely apparent when you get to the top that you're crossing a trail because the trail in front of you continues. It goes off the other side of the ridge. When you get to the top there, and there is a waypoint up there, there's a couple waypoints up there, stop. There's a couple waypoints up there, and you need to turn left at the second one. You need to make sure that you turn left to get on that main trail. It's a beautiful trail. It's one of the more scenic trails of the tour. Montana's off to your right, Idaho's off to your left, and you're going to get lots and lots and lots of good pictures up there. You ride 4 or 5 miles of single track, and then you start coming out on some ATV trails and dirt roads. And finally, State Line Trail turns into a dirt road, a logging road, and it goes for a long way. So you're going to ride State Line Trail, and you're going to be tempted to think, I got this in the bag, it's all over, but it isn't so. Because that road freaking goes forever. And it's twice as long if the sun's already gone down. I don't know how that works, but I know that it's true. So this year, we decided to do everybody a favor. Once you get up to St. Paul Pass, there is a bike trail up there, the Trail to Hiawatha. It's really popular with mountain bikers. They transport people back and forth via bus. You get to ride through a nice long tunnel. It's a couple of miles long. You got to be a little careful in that area. Soloists are allowed to drop down into the valley at that point, and you're about an hour from Wallace on super easy roads if you do that. The only thing you have to worry about is when you're rolling down off of Roland Point and you're heading down that valley, that's the route that those shuttle buses take. And no less than Jimmy Lewis almost ended up as a hood ornament in one of those shuttle buses. They're driven by 16-year-old kids, and they're doing 35, 40 miles an hour coming up these really curvy roads in a big old school bus. So be super careful when you're riding down there. And if you hear a bus coming up the grade, assume that they're trying to make you a hood ornament. Once you drop down into the valley, you're on a bigger road, and it's not that bad. Now, for everybody else, you're going to continue northwest, and you're going to ride a trail that's not too bad. It's a quad trail. It's not a single track. It's got a little gnarl in it, although I've heard they fixed it. It used to be really deeply rutted, but I've heard they straightened all that stuff out. You're going to ride down into the Bullion Mine area, and you can exit there riding past the Bullion Mine. And then once you get down that, you're going to go to Moon Pass Road, and it's all over at that point. If you are still in need of a challenge point, what I decided to do this year was make that last kind of a little bit of an exposed single track around Stevens Peak. That's going to be a bonus section. It's there in black on the map. And you can do that if you need a bonus point late in the tour. That'd be a pretty good way to do it. The other thing you can do is you can ride the challenge section on day 10. If you've already ridden your requisite number of challenge sections, the day 10 challenge section would also serve as an extra point if you needed it. Stevens Peak's a lot better than the day 10 challenge section, in my opinion. It's got some exposure to it. Again, the reason I took it off is it's really late after a long day. It's got some exposure, and a lot of people were getting up there and going, holy cow, this is a lot to process really late in the day as it's starting to get dark in a couple places. So I think that's reasonable. I've ridden the trail. I do believe it is that way. So we'll make that a bonus section if you need an extra point. So this year, if you're getting your 6 a.m. start, which you're supposed to be doing, I'm saying that you're going to roll into Wallace probably between 5 and 6 at night. You should get there pretty early, and that's wonderful for you because Wallace is a great place to spend your last actual night on the tour. If you get to Wallace, Idaho, you have made it. Short of a meteor hitting you somewhere on day 10, you're going to be just fine. Now, let me dial up day 10, and let's go through that real quick. All right, so day 10. The hardest part about day 10 is getting out of Wallace because it's a little confusing getting out of town. A lot of people have to ride around a little bit to find it. I put a waypoint right where you need to be. This page a little slow load up here for me. There, we got it now. So it's a huge map. Even with a fast connection, it takes a while to load. So you're going to head out of Wallace, and there is a waypoint right in the correct road out of town, XYZ0 for day 10. You're going to roll north, and the only place that people have a lot of trouble is right where that XYZ1 is. You're on a paved road up to that point. And some people miss it. If you start riding up like a really nice curvy road that you'd like to be riding on your street bike that looks like a first class pass, you've gone too far. You've started up an actual pass. You need to go back and find that XYZ1. It's a dirt road that goes straight ahead. There are a ton of dirt roads in that area, and I've ridden a half a dozen different ways through there. One's not better than the other. The one that I put on there is one of the shorter ones, and it's one of the easier ones to find. And the waypoints are in places that I think will guide you down the proper road. There's a lot of like 4 or 5 way intersections there. So you can, but I think the waypoints will guide you, and I haven't had anybody that's had too much trouble in the past few years. So you're going to ride up, and you get up to Moon Pass, and just beyond Moon Pass, there's a really nice little section of single track that goes downhill to the river, and you cross the river, and then you start riding a lot of logging roads. You're going to ride logging road after logging road after logging road. They're going to take you up over Spyglass Peak, and eventually you're going to end up down in the McGee area. And there's where you have your choice. There is a challenge section to be done there. If you still need a challenge section, or if you want to pick up an extra point, go ahead and do it. But I wouldn't have anything to do with that unless I needed it. You're close enough to the end that only bad things can happen to you by going in there. Part of that challenge section is really cool. The latter half of it, where you're climbing up out of the creek, Independence Creek, there's some pretty cool stuff up there, although a couple guys have lost their bike. There's a big side hill up there. But the first part of that, where it keeps crossing the creek, doesn't particularly inspire me all that much, but who knows, it might you. You've ridden a lot of single track trail and done a lot of side hills by the time you get there, so I think that you should just take the easiest way and get to where you need to go. So you're going to come around, you're going to come out of the forest. We make 3-person teams. Once you get up where you can sort of see down into the flatlands at the end of all that, 3-person teams got a little bit of a quad trail excursion they have to do. Just adds a little bit of distance, a little time to it, a little bit of route finding too. Everybody else is going to head down into Athol. And there's a pretty good place there. There's a pretty good gas station restaurant there that I've always eaten at. The food changes every few years, but it's a decent place to go. And after that, you are off to the races. So you're going to head up to the last place that you really have to worry about on the tour, which is the area up around Hoodoo Mountain. Now, for those of you who are not from this area, everything that you have ever heard about Idaho that may not be great is encapsulated by Hoodoo Mountain. Hoodoo Mountain is the kind of place everybody that hates the government and basically hates everybody else and is armed to the teeth, has a compound somewhere around Hoodoo Mountain. That's basically where a lot of those kind of folks live. So I would get lost if I were you riding over Hoodoo Mountain. I'd make sure I stuck on the main drag, go up, get my challenge point at the top of Hoodoo Mountain, and then ride out of there, because a lot of that's private property, and I don't think that's a very good place to wander onto private property by accident. You're going to head down into the town of Priest River, which is a nice town. They got good restaurants, several places to get gas there. Uh, and Priest River is, your last major town before you get to the end of the tour. So you're going to gas up there. Most people will have their shuttle waiting for them in Priest River somewhere. That's a pretty good place if you have a shuttle to have it. The other place is you can actually have a shuttle wait for you up near Sandpoint. There's a little town called Sagal, and Sagal has a really nice place where over the years, people that have parked a vehicle, I've told them to park it at Sagal. There's a service station / truck stop there right on the west side of the main drag that will rent you a space pretty inexpensively for a few days, and you can leave a vehicle there. You can leave a vehicle there for free, but they'll rent you a camping spot where you can leave a camper or something if you want there. And it's very, very inexpensive. So that's a pretty good option. Sandpoint's a pretty good option. You can rent U-Hauls there. You cannot rent a U-Haul in Priest River. That place closed. But there's a place in Sandpoint, and there's a couple places over in Washington State that are fairly close as well. So once you leave Priest River, you're going to ride north, and the roads are, they're just, they're dirt roads, but they're kind of fun, and you're getting close to the end of the tour, and you are going to ride up to 10DXYZ68. You're going to head off the main drag road, and you're going to start heading up to Sundance Mountain. Once you leave the main drag, you're probably 20 minutes from the stop of Sundance if you don't get lost. And Sundance is a much more splendid place to end the tour than the place we used to end it, which was this depressing place way down in the valley that stunk. There's grizzly bears all over the place, and the only redeeming feature it had is you could almost throw a rock into Canada. This place is much better. The Selkirks are a beautiful range, and you're going to be loving life right there. So there you go. That's day 9 and day 10. Again, once you make Wallace, your tour of Idaho is essentially over. Just don't do anything crazy in the last day because you got to get to Sundance. So if something happens and you don't, you've gone a long way and really not gotten a payoff that I think most of you were waiting for. So let's see. Let me go back and look and see if there's any questions here I can answer. Jeff, you guys got to Wallace around 6:30. Don't forget to stop at Heller's Grave and Campground. Good history. That's a good tip. Is D9 CP State Line Trail location correct? The CP page shows near 9D YZ1, which is Lundy Ridge. I don't know. I'll go back and look. I haven't finished with the challenge points yet. I still have to go in and do that. So I'll go back in and verify those things again. They're mostly right, but there may be some little mistakes here or there. And I'm going to go tinker with the totals a little bit. None of this will be in a way that will penalize anybody. I may add a few extra ones. After I have time every year to basically sit down and look at the route in detail, I always go in and tinker with that just a little bit before people actually start out in the route. I'll get that done the next few days. The challenge point on day 10, Jackknife Peak, do we have to physically visit that point? Unless there's something to impede you from doing it, yes, you do. So, any questions? But any more questions I can answer about day 9 and day 10 before I call it a night? I'll talk to you a little bit about day 2. I've ridden almost every day 2 route now. I spent the weekend out there, and I spent a lot of time riding. I think I have 20 some odd routes out there that I've planned, and I've ridden all of them but 2 now. I want to make sure that my wheel personally touches everything I'm asking you to ride. Aerial photos are great, but I want to ride it myself. One thing that I have a hard time spotting from aerial photos are fences. And I'm trying to keep the fence crossings to a minimum. And on some of those routes, there are no fence crossings, at least not in the southern part of it. Once you get up close to the butte, there's a few, and there's nothing I can do about that because they're 30-mile-long fences, and you got to get through it somewhere. But in the southern part, on the old route, there were about a half a dozen fence crossings, and I think I've managed to eliminate those from most of the routes. A couple of the routes have a fence crossing or 2 in them, but I think in almost all cases, they're less than they were on the old route. and some of them there aren't any. Again, I had a blast out there riding these routes this weekend. They're a ton of fun. There's some interesting stuff out in that desert for you to look at, and I tried to route you in places that I thought you would really enjoy the scenery. In every case, the new route is better than the route that it replaces. I feel very confident about saying that. I got to go out there and ride one more time. I've got a couple more routes that I need to check out personally, and then I can finish writing up these things. I did a little video a few days ago and showed you what it's going to look like. It's just going to be a simple spreadsheet that's got a set of directions in it. It'll have a compass bearing, distance that you're going to the next place where you're going to stop and check. It'll have a compass bearing from where you're at, immediately the direction you're going to go in. Then it'll have a compass rose bearing that's the general direction towards the next place you're going to stop and check, a checkpoint, if you will. And then there are place names. Occasionally you get a latitude and longitude of where you're going to. And I've used my own set of directions out there, and they've worked great. You have to slow down and stop to check some things out, but I never had any trouble finding my way. And bonus, almost every road and trail I've ridden out there has been on the base map of my Trail Tech Voyager Pro. Well, that's it for tonight. We're up on time. Next week, we're going to talk about navigation. I'm going to devote an entire show to navigation, Trail Tech Voyager Pro, Garmin GPS units. I should have all the waypoint stuff firmed up by next week. I'll go through and check on all that. And we'll spend a whole hour and a half, whatever it takes to talk about navigation. So come up next week with questions. Go through that route with a fine-tooth comb. As I make adjustments this week, I'll probably let you know. By the way, I am going to change day 2. I'm glad I remembered this tonight. We're not going to get lead draw open in time for the tour this year. So that kind of actually opens an opportunity for us. So I'm going to change day 2. And it's not anything that's going to cause you any grief at this point. I know it's late in the game, but it's actually going to make life easier for you. And if you want to do a challenge section, if you want to do the D2CS, I don't recommend it, but if you want to do it, I'm going to be able to give you a much nicer challenge section. So for people that are just staying on the main D2 route, I'm going to eliminate about 5 miles of trail that's not any good anyway. You'll just be able to ride up a road and get on the good part of the trail quicker. So it'll actually make your day 2 a little bit shorter. If you want to do the day 2 CS, we have an opportunity because of this lead draw closure to actually make the CS a lot nicer. I think you'll like it better. So once again, thanks for wasting another perfectly good hour with me talking about this crazy adventure that we're all interested in. Super stoked for the number of teams that are here this year. Again, if you have not done so yet, please go into the forum in the team declaration thread and look at the calendar. I think everybody figured out how the calendar works. First couple of days there were a bunch of I can't make the calendar work, but I think everybody kind of figured it out. By the way, if you don't see your team on the day that it's supposed to be, just keep scrolling down. There's some days where there's a lot of teams. On some browsers, it opens a window that's too small to get everybody in. But I think everybody's there. But please check, and it's incredibly important that I counted the days right. I think I'm pretty good at that, but I did a lot of teams in a real short amount of time. So if you haven't done it yet, go into the forum, check it. And I asked everybody just to put a message in the forum, team so-and-so. We've looked at the dates in the calendar. Everything is copacetic. If it's not, tell me what I need to do to fix it. Then we'll get it all done. But it looks like we have 27 teams. That's last year was 25, and that was a record. So we broke the record again this year. Last year we had, I think, maybe more people because there were a lot of 3-person teams. This year, not as many. A lot of 2-person teams and soloists. Also, you soloists, please reach out to me via Facebook PM. I think that'd be the best way to do it. If you are a soloist on this year's tour, send me a PM on Facebook. This is one of the reasons I asked you all to friend me. I'm going to give you some options on day 2. Again, I've got 25 or 30 different routes out in the desert. Some of them are extremely short, and I kind of reserve those for soloists. I was going to make the solo routes shorter. But some of the longer routes are actually pretty cool. So I'm going to give you soloists a choice. You can tell me whether you just like to get through the desert as quickly as possible, in which case I'll do what I intended to do, which is give you one of the shorter mystery routes. If, however, you're adventurous and you want to try one of the longer routes, I'll reserve one of those for you. So I'll give you soloists a choice about your mystery route in the middle of the desert. All right, everybody. Again, thank you for spending an hour, and I'll be seeing you next week. Cheers.